FSG is one of the largest lighting and electrical companies in the United States here. We're very proud to have sponsored this event with Sensity. And I would like to introduce the cast, a very prestigious cast that we have today, starting with Nevada Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto, right, let's say it correctly, Ed Sayers, who is the Vice President of Energy Services and Sustainable Practices for Simon Properties, Ed Davis, the former Police Commissioner of Boston, and Hugh Martin, the Chairman and CEO of Sensity, and our moderator for today's event. And this is going to be a great discussion. We thank you all for being here today and for the speakers for being here with us as well.
Great. Thanks, Bernie. Well, before we get it kicked off, the discussion kicked off, I'd like to provide a little bit of context. So I think all of you know a lot about LEDs, and outside and high-powered lighting in the world is about 4 billion fixtures, and in North America that number is about 1 billion. And I think we can pretty much agree that sometime over the next 10, 15, 20 years, all of those are going to be converted to LEDs. And what we're going to put in those LED fixtures is one of these. Now, I think we'd all probably call this a driver here. Some people might call it a power adapter. In Silicon Valley, we'd call this a variable output, constant current power supply. But one of these, we're going to install 4 billion of these in the world. And so that is that's an interesting opportunity that Sensity really spent some time thinking about. So we're going to install 4 billion power supplies. They're 20 to 30 feet up in the air. And the labor to install all those power supplies is paid for by the economics of the light. The guy, 120, 100 bucks to get up there with a screwdriver, install this LED fixture, and he's also installing this power supply. So he said, if you've got a housing, you're 20, 30 feet up in the air, and you've got all this, what else could you do when you're up there? And that was the question that really got Sensity started. An observation I would make, having been in the networking business for a number of years in Silicon Valley, is that every great network is built on some other infrastructure. If you think back to telegraph or telephone, railroads. I built a telecom company in the 90s, and that was all about public utility companies being deregulated and allowing them to run fiber on their right-of-ways. So think of these 4 billion fixtures as 4 billion right-of-ways waiting for something to be installed. So if we take those two big ideas, we have an opportunity to build a really important, very important network for the world. And so what do you want to do with this network? And we think the right answer is gather information about the planet or the area immediately around each of these lighting installations. And so the big idea is take this opportunity of the upgrade, add a network so that these lights can now communicate and transmit information, a set of sensors in every single light, bring all of this information back in a very high bandwidth network, because some of the sensors, like video, consume a ton of bandwidth, bring it back into the cloud, and then we wrote an API, a programming interface. So just like with iOS and an iPhone, where there are tens of thousands of applications, there will be tens of thousands of applications that make use of all of this information. So whether it's surveillance or security, or how deep is the snow underneath the lights so you know where to send your plows, or how do you can you give people advice on where they should be parking, we can use all of this information and this application infrastructure. So that's sort of the big idea. Now, how this is all going to happen and how it's going to get, how it will roll out is something that we think we all need to be focusing on right now, and we here at LightFair. So Sensity as a company, so we're sort of like lighting meets networking meets cloud meets application. That's the kind of company we are. So we think lighting is important, but we also think the more important opportunity is to get all these advanced networks out there. And so we're freely licensing our technology, and this is the commercial part about this whole presentation, but we're licensing our technology, and for instance, Amerlux, who I'm sure many of you know, they're the first licensee, but there will be others who put this networking technology in their fixtures. So what we've got is an opportunity to move way beyond controls. This idea that what you want to do is you've got a light and you're going to turn it on and off and maybe maintain it remotely. That's certainly very interesting, but what an amazing opportunity to say we're actually going to be able to change the way we think about the planet and the applications and services that can be done. And I think the best way to think about that is to think about this show. So 30 years ago, I don't know if any of you were going to the Consumer Electronics Show, but it was all about stereos and television sets. You go to CES now, it's all about software and devices and services. And this show can be exactly the same thing. Hopefully it won't take 30 years. But we can build an amazing set of service and applications on top of what we do every day. And so that's the really big thought. And to help stimulate all of us thinking about it, we've invited today 3 customers. And you might think that an attorney general or the head of energy for a major shopping mall retail company or the police commissioner for like Boston may not be a customer, but they actually all will be a customer for this new world. So I think we're going to have a discussion. I think it's going to be exciting and interesting. And I've asked each of the panelists to start by telling us a little bit about their thoughts about a system like this and how this brand new world could come into being. And then we want to come back and talk about what does it mean to have all of this sensing going on and all of this data and have that as an interactive discussion. So maybe we start with Attorney General Masto. You've been, since 2007, you've been doing a great job here in Nevada, and I think thinking a lot about some of how technology can be utilized to make us all safer, particularly in the state.
Sure. No, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Let me maybe put in perspective from an attorney general world what we think about, because we are the attorneys for the state. We are the attorneys for the state infrastructure, the agencies, the boards and the commissions, and we are also there to protect the constituency and the businesses. All of this. We wear so many different hats. So one of the hats, though, that I do wear addresses this issue. I chair a technological crime advisory board. And the thought is to bring together on this Tech Crime Advisory Board local, state, and federal law enforcement, but beyond that, the private sector, as well as the IT, and no offense, but the geeks, to come and sit with us. And why? Because it's so important to have that private-public partnership. We recognize technology is constantly evolving. We all use technology at the state level, state government. Think about all of the data, the information that we get from the constituents that we represent. But more importantly, the security. We're all concerned about security. And I think for our purposes, we're always looking for those tools, the new technology that will help us secure our infrastructure, secure the communities we live in, help us do our jobs and make sure we're there on behalf of our constituents. So when I see something like this new technology, you know, it boggles my mind because I'm not a techno person, but I understand there are so many applications for it. There are so many different uses for this type of technology just in state government. Forget local government, forget private sector, forget everything else. I'm just talking state government. From our prison systems to our welfare system to healthcare to our highway patrol to Department of Public Safety, everything that we do and securing the Capitol and everything, it's all tied into this new technology. I'm not smart enough to think of all of the applications, but I will tell you, if you put this in front of some of the folks that I work with on a regular basis in this technology world, they'll think of that application and they'll figure it out. And this is the perfect foundation for moving forward. It's exciting, but there's also the caveat, and I have to say this because I'm also the law enforcement side of it. We're always concerned about protecting the data and protecting the information. And so what we look for is ensuring that when we do have this technology, it's used in a safe and reasonable manner, but we're also protecting the privacy, protecting the data that comes with it, and putting in place the laws or the ordinances or the the things that we are sure that we can protect against unauthorized intrusions or breaches or that type of technology. So that's kind of all wrapped into the world of an attorney general when we look at this type of technology.
Terrific. Ed, General Masto, I don't know if you know, but Ed is actually a geek too, so I'm not the only geek here. So, Ed, you're running and caring a lot about the energy and other services for a huge real estate firm, essentially. So how do you think about this?
Well, again, thank you, Hugh, for the invitation. For Simon Property Group, if you really take a look at who we are, we're the largest real estate company in the world. We have over 300 million square feet of retail space. We have millions of customers coming through our malls each and every day. Besides our tenants, besides the common areas and our mall teams that work out there, we as Simon have we're part of your community. Right here in Las Vegas, Caesar's Palace, we have farm shops, you have Las Vegas Premium Outlets, you have Metalwood up in Reno, to name just a couple. But with that, we also have we believe, a duty for sustainability. And you may or may not know that we've been practicing sustainability and energy efficiency for many years. We've reduced our kilowatt-hour consumption by almost 30% over the last several years. We've reduced our water consumption, gas consumption, and at the same time still maintained a comfortable and bright environment for any shopper walking into any one of our properties. So it's very appropriate today as to, so what's the next steps? Our mall teams and as professional as they are, as dedicated as they are, we can only turn the lights off once. You can only do so much with your HVAC. And at the same time, what we're trying to promote is when that shopper comes through that door, we're trying to create an environment where the mall is just not a shopping place to go, it's a destination. We want to make sure that those patrons have a good time, there's entertainment, there's dining, and I'm going to call it the shopping experience, and I'm sure our tenants would love it. By the way, if you're in the shopping mood, we're right down the street. But with that said, as Hugh was mentioning earlier, the technology for us today is we have already moved down the road of the LED technology. We are installing today, and have been for a little while, the LED lighting networks, the types of control systems that Hugh was talking about. But there's so much more that we can be doing for our properties, and part of that is using the sensory networks or the lighting sensory networks to help us to evaluate and to create a more personal environment. Now, all of us in this room, well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have our kids walking around with that iPhone in their hand and that smartphone in their hand. Wouldn't it be great if we could somehow communicate to them about, especially in the shopping environment, that we have tenants, down this avenue over here that may have a coupon today, or may have a dining experience that you should be going to, or there could be something, discount for the movies. That's one aspect of it. Part of that is, having the sensory network within our properties and being able to communicate back to a central location and how we can best serve that patron walking through the door. That's one aspect of it. How many times have you gone into a mall and looking for that parking space? Those sensory networks can sit there and tell you where to go on that iPhone or whatever, where the best parking space is next to the best or your favorite shopping store you like to go to. So those are the things that we're looking at in terms of how do we serve you better. It's all about our brand. You may not know or not, but we've just rebranded ourselves, but it's all about customer service and the customer experience. But in order to do that, we need a technology in place to allow us to bring all that data back and be able to say, hey, this isn't really working at this mall. How come all of my patrons are walking through the south entrance and the west entrance, but no one's walking through the north entrance? What's going on over there? So we look at traffic flows. We look at where you like to shop. The types of things that you would like to see in the mall. We want feedback. Along with sustainability, it meets our criteria for not just lighting, but again, those types of sensory networks, those types of applications downloading something to your iPhone that allows us to, give you information as to what's happening in the mall that day or happening that week. The social media, the social network is out there as well, so that's something else that we also communicate in. But I think foremost for our sustainability statement, it's about reducing our energy consumption. It's promoting our energy footprint, reducing our carbon footprint within all our properties. And part of that too is, again, we need the technology and we need that type of intelligence to tell us what's the next step and how do we do that through our systems. Thank you.
Terrific, thanks. And Ed, you've been in law enforcement for 35 years, 40th Police Commissioner of Boston, and before I get some of your thoughts, I just want to spend a moment, because it's been a year since the marathon bombings, and I know you maintain that you had 1,000 great people working for you, but you were really the leader that made it happen, solving that case. So I just want to thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, I'm kind of excited because, General Masto is looking at it sort of at the state level, and you're looking at it all the way right down to the beat cop. What do you think about a system like this?
Well, I was fascinated when I first saw this. I think about it in terms of that beat cop, the man or woman who's out there walking a route or driving a police car in our cities. We have smartphones, but we don't have smart cities yet. And I think that this particular device could provide the infrastructure to make that happen. During the bombing, we were confronted with this terrible tragedy. We were attacked by two individuals, maybe more, who created, they killed 4 people and injured hundreds. I've got to know a lot of the people who lost limbs and have been permanently altered by the actions of these 2 individuals. And so we threw everything that the federal, state, and local government has at that investigation. It took us 102 hours to run down these 2 individuals. But I also think that during that 102-hour period of time, they were building more bombs. They were planning to do more destruction to our nation. And it took us twice as long as it should have, because the cameras that we were able to leverage and utilize in solving that case all came from private locations. There wasn't one government camera that was of any use in the marathon bombing investigation. Everything that we put together in finding these individuals, we had to cobble together through a network of cameras that were on private businesses or in the hands of people who had cell phones. That's unacceptable in this day and age. So much technological work has been done over the last 2 decades. It just has not reached the police yet. It hasn't reached cities. We cobble things together. Right now, the state of the art is, if we need a camera someplace, we get court authorization usually on a complicated investigation. And then I've got 2 cops who have been specially trained hanging off a telephone pole. And I'm lucky sometimes because some of them are formerly electricians, but if that's not the case, I have this fear of one of them getting lit up there. It's a dangerous place to be. But that's really not, with all of the thoughtful work that's been done and the technological advances that we've had in our society, it makes sense for governments to get on top of this and to invest in a thoughtful infrastructure that collects data that's going to be helpful. And it can be, it's all hazards. When Doug Gillespie, who's a friend of mine, who's a sheriff here, when we meet as police commissioners and police chiefs and sheriffs, we talk about all hazards. We don't just talk about terrorism. We talk about floods. We talk about earthquakes. We talk about natural disasters that befall cities. If we don't have the right tools in place, then people die. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a thoughtful, planned out approach to a system that will help us. I'll tell you a fast story. When I was the police chief in Lowell, we got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the call went out to my officers, and it went just like this. Car 4, go to Gorman Moore Street. We have a report of a poisonous gas cloud. Well, there was silence on the radio. Nobody knew what to do. The cruiser goes to the scene, calls back, and this is what he says. Car 4 to Lowell, that's correct. We have a poisonous gas cloud at Gorman Moore Street. So we called the fire department because we didn't know what else to do. But the truth of the matter is, my guys often call themselves blue canaries. They're out there in the mine hoping that nothing happens. And that's not acceptable in this day and age with the technology that we have, with the systems that we should have in place to protect each and every one of you in your homes. You know, that poisonous gas cloud was a chlorine cloud that emanated from a tanker, a railroad tanker that had sprung a leak. And it literally was you know, potentially fatal. Luckily, nobody died in that particular incident, but that was only because it happened early in the morning and by the grace of God. So those are the things that I think about when I think about your equipment. I'm very excited to be part of this. Thank you, Hugh.
Okay, terrific. Well, I just came back from the American Association of Airline Executives down in San Antonio 2 weeks ago. And out where we live in San Jose, there was that kid who climbed on a 767 and hopped a ride to Hawaii. Airport perimeter security, I think, is a big deal. I'm particularly interested. You had a sort of a direct experience with this kind of thing, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about what we can do about it.
Sure. I got a call from the police chief in Milton, Massachusetts, who said, hey, I've got another one of your homicides out here, probably from your gang guys. Milton's a nice little community right next to Boston, and unfortunately, every once in a while, one of my homicides gets dumped in Milton. So he's not happy about that when that happens. So I felt bad about that. I sent some investigators out, and they came back and they said, you know, Commissioner, this guy has unbelievable injuries. There's something else going on here. It took a few days, but we found out that this was a young man, a runaway, 16 years old. He climbed into the landing gear of a 737 on the field in Atlanta, and the plane took off. He died when it got to altitude. When the plane was coming into Logan Airport, the landing gear opened up, and he dropped from several thousand feet into a residential neighborhood. Terrible tragedy. But the truth of the matter is, even in a small airport like Logan is a very, I mean, it's a major international airport, but it's, as far as land, it's in a very difficult place. They don't have a lot of land. But even in an airport like that, there's too much area to cover with the human eye. And they put up fences and they have barbed wire, but the truth of the matter is they need better monitors on the perimeters of all of these airports.
Do you think, at the state level, do you think about airports and airport security, or is that sort of TSA and the local airports?
The local governmental entities, so the counties, are responsible for the airports and the airport structure, and working with the federal authorities. At the statewide level, the applications for security, I could see, there's so many. I mean, I talked about corrections and Department of Prisons, but Department of Transportation. You know, the state's responsible for all of the roadway. But let me give you an example of why, and what the commissioner said just kind of jogged something that I think you should all understand. In the state of Nevada, it's over 110,000 square miles. There are 7 New England states that could fit within the borders of Nevada. There's only about 2.7 million people living here, however. 80% of them live here in Clark County, where you are right now. That means there's a vast area of uninhabited land where there's a lot of activity that can go on, where there's not a lot of policing easily you can get to. You can't fly to it, so you have to drive to it. Between here and Reno, it's an 8-hour drive. Between here and Elko, which is the northern part of the state, it's another 8-hour drive. And so we do know from law enforcement, with the major corridors running through there, Interstate 80 that goes from east to west in the north part of the state, and then I-15, which you see coming through here and into Utah. There's a lot of activity, criminal activity, whether it's drug trafficking or human trafficking, going on in some of these areas that are more rural. And if we have the lighting, if we have the technology, the security, you don't have to be out driving a car out there to be able to see it. You can be notified of it through a dashboard or whatever, a camera or whatever that comes into your police department. So there's so many different applications. Yes, I think our airports here absolutely would have the same concerns with respect to security, but there are other state agencies that I think would have the same issues and want to be aware of the technology for their benefit.
Well, one of the things that we run into a lot is that of course, there are lights just about everywhere throughout the state. There are lights up there. But many times those lights are on timers or on circuits that are controlled. So much of the time, there's no power there. So if you want to put a camera there, now you've got to figure out how are you going to get the power there to run the, and so the beauty of a system like this is that you can actually just, wherever you see a light, you can have a sensing node. And the networking and all the backhaul and the application interfaces are all taken care of. So, I think one thing that we all sort of think a little bit about, and the way I like to think about it is if I told you 20 years ago that you were going to carry something around in your pocket or your purse that had 2 HD video cameras, a microphone, a GPS locator, and was connected to the net 24 hours a day, you might feel a little paranoid about that and wonder who might be doing what with it. And I think the point is that what we've done as a government and a society is we've sort of figured out a balance between the value that this thing brings to us and the protections that are available. So I think, if you think about this trade-off of privacy and security and privacy and other value that you can bring, it's an important topic, and it's one that I think is going to have to evolve. Just like this phone has evolved over the last 20 years, I think that exact area is going to have to evolve. And I think it'd be interesting just to sort of kick around some of the ideas. So Ed, you mentioned a number of terrific applications that I think could bring a lot of value. But how does Simon think about this issue of what's Simon's and what's an individual's and so on?
That's a tough one. I think for Simon, as far as the application of the iPhone or whatever, I think in society today is I say my children, the millennials, the 18 to the 32, 34-year-olds, they're walking around with that iPhone every day. They are definitely connected. But when you walk into a mall, and I don't know the legalese to this at all, is if you do have the network or the Sensity there for them to be able to hook up to, is that something they can opt into and allow themselves to be, to have access to that information that we just spoke about. And I think there's going to be, from a societal point of view, from a governmental point of view, from a legal point of view, is, could that be construed as, not an invasion of privacy, but, take away some privacy away from them. And I think the fact that they're doing it now. You're opting into the social media. You're opting into the internet. You're opting in every single day. Starbucks. You're opting to Starbucks. You're ordering pizza or whatever else. So I think that from our perspective is we view that as an excellent vehicle for reaching out and allowing the younger folks and folks in this room to experience a lot more than, hi, I'm at the mall and I go down and I buy a great outfit or I have something to eat, but what's really happening at that mall? What's really happening in the outside world? Hey, I found this great sale. What do? They get right on that social media, whether they Twitter or what have you, and they're reaching out to their friends and they're snapping pictures. And to Hugh's point, it's come so far so fast that we're at. I think it's an opportune time for everybody in this room to take advantage of a technology that is not only going to, connect you even more, but bring you information and perhaps some education, a little enlightenment as to what else is out there. An example, I'm just going to back up a little bit. We talk about security. Again, this is a type of network where we talked about sensory, we talked about the lights. One of our malls in California, we have 120-foot poles down there. Well, it's literally impossible to light up some of these parking lots. But what do? You search out the technology and you're looking for that type of backhaul that he was referring to, putting cameras up on the poles or whatever, and we were able to work with Sensity, and found that technology. And that's what I would urge everybody in this room today is the LED light is that vehicle, is that application in which allows you, it enables you to move to a whole different level of intelligence within a building, an office building, and law enforcement. And that's why I think it's so important that in terms of Simon, we jump on that bandwagon now, because I can see it coming. The question is, how do I get it enabled, and how do I do it across 200 malls just here in the United States? So with that said, that's the challenge that faces us right now, is how we integrate that in.
Yep. And what do people in Boston or in any community, what do they think about this? I mean, people who actually live in houses and have to deal with this every day.
Well, if you were to go into a neighborhood and say, I can put a device in that's going to stop shootings, or that's going to hold somebody 100% accountable for every shooting that happens in this neighborhood, they would beat a path to your door to have that system put in there. When you go into a neighborhood that's in trouble, that has a lot of violence, they're looking for answers. And the high-level conversations about what we should be collecting and how we should be storing it kind of take a second seat to being able to survive through the night, or let your kids go out in the yard. I mean, there are places in Boston where parents, mothers particularly, won't let their kids go out into the yard during the day in the summertime. And it's like that in every city. Chicago has an unbelievable problem this summer. I just was meeting with the superintendent from the Chicago Police, and he's struggling with that right now. So if you're offering answers to that, people are going to look for those answers. There has to be a conversation about what happens with the data. And I don't think it's the collection of the data that's a problem. I think it's the use of it, or misuse of it. And so how do you guard against that? How do you make sure that that doesn't happen? And there are ways to do that. We need to have a debate about it. We need to have a discussion. But it shouldn't stop us from moving forward with technologies that can save lives. And I think that's where we're at right now. The field has come so far. It's incumbent upon, especially public safety people, to stand up and say, this needs to be debated, it needs to be coordinated, we need to put something in place. I don't understand the argument that it's better to leave the telephone data that everybody's talking about, with the NSA intercepts. They want to, well, Snowden and all of that whole debate. But someone in Congress has said, well, we've got a great idea, let's leave it with the corporations. I don't know if that's the answer. I mean, corporations are in business to make money. I think that there's a solution here. It just needs to be worked out, and it shouldn't stop us.
Yep, yep. General Masto, so Ed introduced, I think, an important concept to how we figure this out, of opt-in. So what are you guys thinking about this?
From a perspective, we have this conversation quite often when we meet as AGs and we talk with some of the service providers. We'd much prefer the opt-in than requiring somebody to opt out, because that gives the customer the choice to say, this is what I want to be a part of or not, and not have to figure out, okay, I got to opt out, I got to figure out how to maneuver the system and get out. That's something we've always pushed and supported. I'd rather the customer be able to opt in. But I think the commissioner is right. I think we haven't had enough of a discussion on this whole issue of privacy and balancing that with, say, the security needs, government versus private sector. We've had these debates here in the state on various issues, and when it comes to the government collecting data, people really understandably get upset about that. But then when I talk to them and I say, but do you realize the private sector and the corporations collect that data and more on you as well and use it? Do you realize that? And I don't think people do, because they have the opportunity, they think, to opt in, and they choose it, where they go on the internet or what they're doing when they're on their applications, they're choosing to do so. They don't realize that when they choose that, there's also additional information that's being collected and how it's being used. We have a fabulous facility here called the Switch Center that collects data that is just phenomenal, that works with its servers for various corporations and companies, and there is a lot of data there. And it's secured and it's protected, but it is data on individuals that people use and the private sector uses to data mine. And government does to some extent data mine as well for security purposes. But again, there's not enough discussion and debate about that to say, where's that fine line? What's the balance? Where's the balance that we'll all accept to allow some of that data mining to go on for our protection and allow the government to do so? I just think that gets lost quite often because it's an emotional issue for people. They're passionate about it, and sometimes we just don't have enough of that discussion and dialogue, and it needs to occur. And I say that because this is a perfect example. This technology evolves so quickly. And again, the commissioner is right. In law enforcement, we're always lagging behind. We're always trying to figure out how to catch the criminal, get there quickly, use the technology, and it moves so quickly. And I think we need to do a better job of partnering with the private sector, working together to figure out how we can address these issues that the public has in general.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talk a lot about with customers is this whole issue of video. So cameras, HD cameras that give you the resolution that you want, that's a ton of data. And you know, we worked really hard to haul all of that data around. But when you talk about 5,000 or 10,000 cameras in a city, that's a lot of data. And so I think where we're going, and I think where the world is going, is to this idea of video analytics, where you're actually you store the data on the camera. It doesn't go anybody, and after 7 days, 30 days, it's gone. The data's on the camera, and then you're pushing events out. Hey, I just identified, you can go to our booth right now, you can see there's a bag and it's unidentified and it's all by itself. I'm going to flag that as an event, or this guy has stayed in the area for so long, or this guy just hopped a fence. So I think that's going to be a very important area down the road. But and I think in there will lie some of the assurances that people get, which one, by doing this, we actually get advance notice. So instead of forensically trying to pull all this camera data, you might actually have a shot at saying, hey, there's a gas cloud, there's a bag that's unidentified, there's been a group of people that have been hanging around downtown. So you've got a shot at getting it before something bad happens. But then you're not capturing those things permanently where nothing did happen. So,
right.
Yeah.
And can I just touch on that data analytics, because that's my favorite term, and I don't think we use it enough in government. Again, an area where we can learn from the private sector. Data analytics, data is so important, because think about it. If we, just from a law enforcement perspective, if we started looking at data and looked at data to indicate where we should put our resources in law enforcement, we would be more efficient with taxpayers' dollars. We'd be more efficient with addressing the crime. But instead, if you think about it, from a law enforcement perspective, everything we do is really subjective. From the beat cop who makes the decision, discretionary decision, whether he's going to arrest or not, or what he's going to do, from the prosecutor who makes the decision to charge or not, and the discretion to move forward. We don't think about if we release them, are they going to commit another crime? We don't capture that data to see the recidivism rate. Are they going to be a harm to society if they're released before they do their jail time or they go to trial? There's so much data that we do not collect that could tell us and help us improve upon our policing abilities. And to me, I think the more, that's why I support the data analytics and getting that data to help us define how we should focus our resources and how we can use them in an efficient manner. And it can be used. You don't have to take away all of the discretion or the subjectivity, because I think you still need that. But you need the data. And we in government don't use enough of it to carry out the functions, to do the services that we need to do on behalf of the constituents. And that's why I think it's important to have that dialogue and partner, again, with the private sector, because you do it so much better than we do in government.
Yep. Well, terrific. Well, so I don't want to belabor this process, and there's a lot of things going on here in Las Vegas, but what I really wanted to sort of stimulate in your mind this idea that it's not just about the lights. And every time you see, particularly outside, you see an LED fixture up there, and you know there's one of these in there. And you know that somebody spent at least $100 to put that thing up there, maybe more. And the fact that we didn't do anything other than install a light, all we did is just replace the same thing that's been there for hundreds of years or tens of years with something that's a little more reliable and more efficient. It's a big deal. And this is a major opportunity both for our industry, but also I think a major opportunity for society in general. And I wanted to thank these great panelists for coming here to talk a little bit about it, and hopefully we've just sparked something that you can think about. And I can tell you that as many of you who are out in the business selling fixtures, there isn't a single city, and I've talked to a lot of them, but there isn't a single city that has a line item budget that says, we're going to put so many $1 million into Internet of Things, or we're going to spend this many $1 million on connected cities, despite all of the great advertising from some large companies. Nobody has that. They do have line item budget for lighting maintenance, and some of them might have line item budget for LED replacement or upgrade. And it's those dollars that we can use combined with technology like this to really make a difference. So I guess I want to thank the panelists for coming here, and I want to thank all of you for taking some of your afternoon to come and hear us talk a little bit about what might be. And we're going to be around if you'd like to talk to any of us for the next 30 minutes or so. And I think, yeah, the bar is still open. I can see that. So thank you again.
Thank you.